Hello, welcome to the Bid Academy webinar series. Today's topic's about executive summaries. We'll just wait for a few seconds while people come into the webinar. We can see people coming in and entering, so we'll just wait a couple of moments, Mark, and then we'll get started very shortly, but we're very pleased to have you all here today from wherever you are around the world.
Excellent stuff. And on that note, why don't we play a Who's Joining from the Furthest Away competition? So if anyone can see the chat, pop your location in, that would be great. It's always fun to see where people are joining us in this digital day and age.
Thank you very much, Andrew Jones. We'll ignore that comment, but thank you. Great. Adelaide, my hometown. We've got Canberra. We've got Radelaide. Where's Radelaide? There's a new one to me, Monique. Sydney, fantastic. All around the world. A couple of cameras. Ardrossan, nice part of the world.
Ardrossan? Is that the one in Scotland?
No, not that part of the world, Mark.
Oh, that one. I was going to say that would be the winner if it was.
Canada, now that's the winner for mine at the moment. Well done, Sarah D. Great to have you here. Some Brizzies, some Newcastles in Australia, not Newcastle in the UK, I would expect, Mark. Country Queensland, excellent work. Fantastic. Well, let's get started. Hey, Mark, all right. We are delighted to have you here on the Bid Academy Exec Summaries webinar. Delighted to welcome my colleagues, Mark Riley, who is the General Manager of our Bid Academy, and Lara, who does all the work behind the scenes to make these webinars happen. So we'll be your hosts for today. Today we are going to look at a sneak peek into two things. The first thing we're going to look into a sneak peek into is the world of executive summaries. And we're going to take you into a world of not the theoretical, but into the practical. Some practical tips that will help you navigate the exec summary world. And the second sneak peek we're going to give you is the fact that what you're going to see on this webinar today is a sneak peek into one of our modules for our recently launched Certified Bid Writer program. So you'll get some insight into the content, the practical content from that program, the Certified Bid Writer program. So to start off the session today, what we're going to do, we're going to take a bit of a poll of the people on the call today, and we're going to ask you some questions about exec summaries. And as I'm speaking, we're going to ask you to look at the question, and there should be a poll pop up on your screen. First one is, how often do you include an exec summary? And just tick the one that's most appropriate for you. We are launching that.
This is very exciting. We can see lots of alwayses, which is good. A few oftens and sometimes. I think we've got a good representation then of people. Lara, I don't know if you want to share the results. Oh.
Whoa, we are, and always interesting, fantastic to see that we get the exec summary. For those who've done the foundation certification, this is sometimes one of the questions in the certification foundation program. And the question is, how often do you include exec summary content? So James says he often does it, but without the secret sauce. James, well, you're in the treat today. We're going to show you some of that secret sauce. Let's go on to the next one, shall we, Mark? The next question. Are we ready to get on the next one, Lara? Okay, the next question is, let's have a look at exec summaries in your world. All right. When do you or your team write them? One, before the bid comes out, early in the bid process. Number two, in the last days or in the last hours before submission. Let's have a look to see.
I did an R about putting an extra category as in later than that, just out of interest to see if there's any last minute exec summary writers. That's good to see there's not too many in the bottom box by the looks of it. So
box, yes, we have a good some good work there. Pretty even spread from the first two, the split between early in the bid process and in the last day before submission. Oh, I'm giving the game away. Perhaps Lara, you can share those results for us, please. And you should see there that we have a pretty even mix of the first two. Either we start early, or we leave them till the last days. And there's pros and cons for both of those. We are going to touch on those today, are we, Mark?
We are indeed.
Let's have that as a benchmark for what we're going to launch in today. So that's great. Let's go to the third poll. Third poll is exec summaries in your world. How do exec summaries feel? Are they a struggle? Are they easy or they're not? So this first one is, it's very easy. We're nailing one or two drafts. You've got this, you're all over this. It's an absolute nightmare. We go round and round in circles. Since everyone has a different opinion of what we need to do, particularly in large teams. You might get the odd seagull fly in and leave a mess and leave out for you to clean up, or somewhere in between. It would really help if we had a recipe. All right, how are we going there? We get a pretty good participation in the poll, Mark.
Yeah,
so
very engaged.
Lara, time to start sharing those, I think. And we have that. Most people fit into the somewhere in between, but wouldn't it be handy to have some sort of recipe to follow? For those who are in the nightmare world, yes, welcome to the nightmare world. It can be that, but there's hope for you. There's light at the end of the tunnel, isn't there, Mark? Always light at the end of the tunnel for people in that nightmare, and you can wake up from that nightmare.
I just want to give a shout out to the one person who nails it in one or two drafts. Well done. I say good on you.
High five. High five for that person. Well done. All right, final poll for today, and then we'll get to Mark to wrap all this up together and give you the content. So, exec summaries in your world. Why the heck do we include one? Isn't that a great question? Why do we bother going to all the trouble of including exec summaries in our bids? And what's their purpose? Purpose is to briefly summarise the rest of our submission, to explain our wonderful capabilities, so make them all about us, and to explain how we will solve the customer's problems better than ours. So which are we more inclined, which would we like to do, but which do we actually do? There's probably two questions here, which we would like to do, but this is what actually goes on in your world. What's your world like? To explain all your wonderful capabilities. We have one or two of those. Briefly summarise risk management. We have a few of those. So any others? Any takers? Any final takers? Final poll. Get your answers in there. Probably should have had is there anything else? And leave a comment maybe, but we'll
well, we can do that in the chat. I think
in the chat. If you got anything
anyone's
else,
got any specific questions or pain points in the world of exec summaries, by all means, drop them into the chat and we will do our best to pick them up and weave them into our little story as we move forward.
So, Mark, the outcome of that was a bit overwhelming response to this one. We want to explain how we'll solve the customer's problem. And we've got a comment, can the answer be all of the above? There's always one, isn't there, Mark?
There always is one, yeah.
Always, in this case, there's two, perhaps a mix. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to hand over to, done my bit, I'm going to hand over to Mark Riley for most of the rest of the webinar. He's going to run through the outputs of this and the content. Mark, tell you what the agendas are today. So I'm going to hand over to you to run through the remainder. Thanks, Mark.
Brilliant stuff. Thanks, Nigel. And thanks, everyone, for sharing your thoughts. It seems to me that we've got quite an elite, knowledgeable and interested audience on the topic of exec summaries. I know for a fact it's one of my favorites in terms of the fun that goes on in and around exec summaries, the value that you can add by learning to do it really well. But what I've found is, and I'd be interested to see whether people agree with this, but over the years, I found it all a bit confusing, right? You know, the whole thing around exec summaries, there's all this language around, you know, like win themes, value props, drivers, strategy statements, customer issues, hot buttons, headlines. What on earth are they? Then it should be about them, or should I do one? Should I not do one? How long should it be? There's always a favorite question. How long should your exec summary be? My boss said I should do it this way, which is also very prevalent, I think. Does anyone read them anyway, etc.? Oh, it should be about us. When should I do it? You know, all these things, right? So for me, it's pretty complicated. What we want to do in this little session is to break it down. Now, you might have noticed a bit of a cooking theme, right? So what we're going to do is break the world of exec summaries down into the ingredients that you need to write a really good one. We mentioned the topic of secret sauce. So inside of there, we're going to talk about what the secret sauce is. The recipe, in effect, is then how you go about making an exec summary. And then the third bit is around how do you actually master all the skills that you need to be able to create a really powerful exec summary. And as Nigel mentioned, we're going to reference some of the ways that you can go about mastering the skills that you need to get your exec writing to the next level in the context of a couple of our flagship training programs. Now, I mentioned that we're having a bit of a cooking theme, so here's a gratuitous picture of some food for no other reason other than it looked really nice, so I thought I'd put that in. All right, but without further ado, let's crack on and talk about the ingredients, right? So within that context, what is this secret sauce business that we're talking about? Now, in a Bid Academy and in our sister company, the BidWrite, we look at a lot of bids every year, and we tend to look at them in the context of a spider diagram. So some of you on the call might have seen something like this or a version of it in other webinars and just around the traps. But in essence, what we tend to do is benchmark a lot of the proposals that we read against these 10 criteria. So, and essentially in the middle is kind of a score of 0. And on the outside is a score of 5. So if you're like up there with best practice and you're excelling in all of these areas, then you'll see a trace. You can see the blue line around the outside. Essentially, you're scoring 5 out of 5. So you get a kind of nice octagon. What is it? What's a 10-sided thing, Nige?
Yeah, smart. It is correct. Whatever that is.
What are those? Anyway, all right. So, put it in the chat if anyone knows what a 10-sided object is. Anyway, I can't remember. It doesn't really matter. Thank you. That's exactly it. Decagon. Well done, Lynn, I think. All right, onwards. So the point being that when we're talking about secret sauce, what you've got there is that red line is kind of the typical scores we see when we benchmark proposals against those kind of 10 core criteria, right? So on the bottom left side, if you like, you can see the scores are all pushing out to sort of 3s and 4s and out of 5. And so the red line is distorted towards the southwest, if you like. But what's really noticeable is the top right-hand side of that diagram is flattened, right? So, and typically what that means is there's a lack of the more customer-centric and competitive-centric messaging and content in the submissions that we read, right? So, and obviously the executive summary is a core part of that, of how you would score well in these sectors, right? So if there is a definition of secret sauce, it's more like an absence of something in terms of those strategic messages, client focus and competitive focus. And that's the stuff that your customers need to be able to make a choice and as to whether to pick you or do nothing or pick somebody else. Any thoughts on that, Nigel, before we gallivant on?
It's overwhelming, the amount of lack of custom focus and strategic messages that are around in bids. And even for those more mature organisations that think they're customer focused and have strategic messages in there, it's surprising how those messages can even be improved. So yeah, look, the stats are overwhelming on that, Mark, that this is the area that needs to be improved. And exec summaries lends itself very well to doing that.
And so a really simple way to think about that is, and again, on the topic of what's the secret sauce, it's really the thing that's often missing is what your story to win is. And that gets wrapped up in terms like strategy and, win themes and all that type of good stuff, right? But in reality, it's an analysis of the customer, what you know about the people involved, what do they want to buy, what options do they have on the table, who's got relationships with who. It's the other inputs to the competitive landscape, so the options that the customer has, and what's the relative appeal or detractions of those options in their mind. And then the third part of the story to win is the capability. So that's all the stuff we love talking about, the bits that it's all about us, where we are, the skill sets we have, the geographies that we're working in. And so all of that stuff wraps up into what we call in the Bid Academy, the story to win, aka your secret sauce in your proposals. So that's kind of just setting the scene. In terms of the ingredients into that sauce or into your proposal, because of the complexity involved in the language, and we're involved in the APMP and all sorts of different sort of training forums around the world, and we're more than aware that there's a zillion types of terminology, zillion terminologies and phrases that I think get in the way of us doing a good job. So at the Bid Academy, we've kind of broken it down into 5 core ingredients, which you may choose to use in the front pages of your proposal. So in the cover page, let's say you might use some of these elements in the cover letter, and certainly all of them you'll be using in your executive summary, which is the topic of today's little session. So let's just zoom through those ingredients and give you some examples and definitions of them. And we just, in the Bid Academy, we advocate this terminology just to keep it simple. There's lots of other things out there, and you can get trained in all sorts of different sales methods and things like that. But the core principles, I think, apply certainly everywhere that I've seen. But and we'll go from there. All right, let's get going. So the first ingredient to your secret sauce is what we call headlines. All right, so these in essence are kind of the number one outcome you're going to deliver for your customer, right? So an example of that might be, in our world, we're quite often use training as a way for bid teams to attract and retain the best bidding talent. So we might, in one of our proposals, put that on the front page, right? So that's what we call a headline. And you might use that on the cover page, you might use in your cover letter, and you'd probably start your exec summary with that, that headline. It comes from newspapers. If you think about the way that newspapers work, they always have an active, interesting titles and typeface, across the stories that they're promoting. The next up is our old friend, the win theme, right? So there's all sorts of stuff that goes on with win themes, I think. The way that we think about that is think of the themes as the 2 or 3 outcomes that matter most to the customer. So these are the themes around which you're going to tell a story to win, right? So by definition, the customer needs to care about those. You might be thinking, but what about my capability? Or, what about my global presence? Or what about my widget or my gadget? And here's the trick with win themes. Ironically, they're not about you. They're about what the customer wants to buy. So some examples there might be built into our training approaches are you're going to retain more content because of the way that you learn. You're going to be able to learn when you want, or you're going to have more impact on your operations depending on the sorts of things that matter. So they're what we call a theme, because those are a theme around which we're going to tell story to win. And they show themselves up typically in the cover letter and the exec summary, but there also may be one of those themes that is so powerful and so overarching that it actually promotes itself and becomes a headline. Next up, benefit statements, value propositions, all those type of things. We just like the word benefit statement because it's a statement of benefit, right? So it sort of becomes a little less ambiguous as to what to include. And then I like to think of these as a promise to the customer, right? So what is it that you're going to do for them? An example here is by investing in bid training, you will attract the best talent in hot skills market, let's say. And you'd certainly want to be mentioning these high-level benefit statements in your cover letters and going to town a little bit more on them in the exec summaries. And then the next bit, these are the highlights of your offer, which underpin your win theme and your benefit statement, right? So the main points that you need to cover to explain your approach. If you can select the points in there that highlight one of your competitive strengths as opposed to the BAU that everyone else will say, then the more powerful those highlights become. So we can say some stuff in there like how, our training might align with best practice modular learning formats, yada, yada, yada. And again, we'll be telling our story in a little bit more detail in the exec summaries. So we've got space or real estate that we can use to land those highlights. And of course, proof comes in at the end, right? We want to be making sure that we're putting in key data to help our readers feel comfortable that what we've said is true. So things like satisfaction ratings on our training courses, completion rates, testimonials, yada, yada, yada. Wow, that was a lot. Nige, any thoughts on that lot?
Yeah, I'd like to get a quick poll in the chat, or quick idea in the chat about who starts exec summaries with things like, our company has been around since 1923. We have 15,000 offices around the world, and we employ all these people. Anyone seen exec summaries that start like that, all about us? If you have, put them in the chat, yes or no, because that is those sort of things, those sort of exec summaries goes against the grain of what Mark's talking about here. The headlines and the win themes are what we start with. Charlotte says, seen them and fall asleep. Good, yes. There's a few people out there. We are the greatest. Yes, we are the greatest. That's the way to give those. So yes, people know what we're talking about when they say we are the greatest. All about me. We've got
very excitingly, Jeanette's got a hand up. I'm going to see if I can get Jeanette. Jeanette, you happy to talk? I'll see if I can let you talk. I was hoping that Jeanette's hand was up on purpose. Is that right? No?
Yeah, I was just agreeing, that's all.
Ah, beautiful. Well, there we go. Got the Would you like to say anything while you're here, or are you all good?
No, is everyone having a good day?
Brilliant. I am. Anyway. Thanks for that.
Interesting comment from Robin says, yes, try telling MDs that they are wrong. Get your MD
yes.
all next time, Robin. I reckon that's what we need to do, educate them. Yes, great. That's a great challenge.
This is where the recipe tactic comes in quite well, right? So who's going to tell Jamie Oliver that his recipe is no good, right? There we are. All right, onwards. We should keep her going. So let's just dive a little bit deeper on a couple of those elements. Headlines and win themes. Think of these as the common problems your customer want to solve. There's a bunch of the different groups that we put out. We go and talk to our customers about and dig and delve around finding these problems that the customers want. They can sit in financial, social, quality, productivity, risk, and there's probably other categories that you can think of, right? So the idea of this is that we dig deep and wide to uncover the topics that really matter to the customer and do what we can to prioritize them. So when it comes to headlines and win themes, and this is a grab out of the middle of one of our programs, the Certified Bid Writer stuff, Certified Bid Writer course. Headlines and win themes, think of them as 3 to 4 word summaries of something the customer wants to buy, right? And a headline will emerge from a collection of win themes where it becomes an overarching topic that your customers want, right? So that's the thing that's going to be on the front page of your proposal. They need to be desirable, obviously. The customer, they need to relate to a problem the customer really wants to be solved. They need to be short, as we said before, and they need to be few, right? So the trick here is to try to land 3 or 4 headlines and win themes that really matter, rather than try and tell the whole of your story, because you lose impact really quickly. A little bit about benefit statements. Think of these, I said before, as a promise to your customer. Essentially, it's a brief statement of what they're going to get. Again, these need to be desirable. If you've got your win theme selection right, then they will be by definition, because your benefit statements are going to support and build on your argument around the win theme. They need to be, in an ideal world, unique. So you're making a statement that you can solve your customers' problems better than other options that they have on the table to them. In an ideal world, that's what your benefit statements do. And when they do that, they're at their most flavoursome, should I say, or potent. And they need to be specific, all right? So tailored to a particular opportunity and the benefits. If you can, quantify them. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. And the last little bit actually is if you can also prove that you've done exactly the same thing before, then you're kind of in benefit statement nirvana, shall we say. All right, here's a simple formula that we use. This is derived from the APMP body of knowledge, but simplified a little bit. I really like this formula because it's a little bit ugly, but what it actually does is it drives you to start with the customer every time, right? So that first bit, if you force yourself when you're writing your benefit statements to begin with the customer, it gets you into a completely different mindset. Very, very easy to start with our widget, or we can do this, or so really good if you can shift it to the customer space. Then explain some sort of benefit or outcome like we've got there. We might improve, reduce, accelerate, do something. If we can quantify it, fantastic. And there's a whole other topic in a webinar in itself, which we've kind of done before and we'll probably do again because it's a really interesting one. And then you're connecting these benefits to your solution. So what's really interesting is that your bit comes right at the end of that construct, which is a bit of a shift for a lot of people. And if that, the last part of that sentence, the solution approach, the highlight that you're talking about there is tied to a unique capability, then fantastic stuff. Here's an example. So customer X can expect a 20% uplift in tender win rates by enrolling its entire team in Australia's only modular results-driven training program that covers the entire tender life cycle. It's a bit long, that one, Nigel. I've just realized when I read it out.
Get to the point.
Brilliant stuff. All right. So that's a little bit about the secret sauce and the ingredients of an exec summary, right? So we've got the headlines, we've got the benefit statements, we've got the highlights, we've got the proof, and we've got our win theme sitting in there. So let's have a little talk about the recipe. So what do you do with all that stuff, right? Let's get into that. Oh, there's another gratuitous food picture, it seems, Nigel. So it looks quite nice, doesn't it, if you like scallops? All right, so all right, folks, stay with me. What we're going to do now is a simple recipe for an exec summary. There's lots of different ways of doing it. We could probably come up with 3 or 4 different models that we use in different situations. This, well, I feel anyway, is the simplest one that will get it to do its job. So we spoke about headlines. Imagine you've got your front cover. You're not going to call it proposal 4. You're going to call it something interesting, a headline. So you want to be restating that in your exec summary. You might have a title that says exec summary, or you might, either way, you want that to reinforce that core message. Next, we want to set the scene. So this is all the bit, instead of talking about you, you're trying to not repeat what's been written in the RFT in terms of what they're trying to do. You want to show your interpretation of their vision, of why they're doing what they're doing in terms of go-to-market for your skills. Then you start building in your win theme descriptions, right? So that win theme might say accelerating learning in our case, or it might be getting better results or something of that nature. I put my benefit statement in there, then I start weaving my highlights that I've carefully selected that, if possible, will negate the strengths of your competitors and highlight your strengths in the mind of your customers. And then you've got your proof. So that's kind of your first win theme, the story of it. Then you repeat that for your second win theme, and then again for your third win theme, and not forgetting to put targeted proof and stuff like that in there. And then the final bit, I don't know about, what do you think about closing exec summaries, Nigel? I'm always kind of, there's a few things that I've seen. Have you got any favorites?
Yeah, we've had some robust discussions around these closing comments, Mark. Look, I feel there is, you don't want to, we're not writing a novel here or a murder mystery where the reader reads that at the end of the book that the butler did it. So that's not the purpose of the exec summary. If they get to the end, that's fantastic. And you might just close it off with, you know, my tip is to take the key idea that you've got and reword it in a different way, just to reinforce the key point of your overall theme. That's the one I typically use, but it's exec sum specific. But it does need some sort of finish, I think, Mark, rather than just leave it hanging. Does need some sort of finish.
Totally agree. If anyone's got any favorite, favorite closes, pop them in there. I've seen like a personal commitment from senior execs where there's a personal play in there. I love Andrew. Pick me. In all a lot of people actually do close with a bit of one of those, don't they? A reiteration of the why me bit is fine. Some next steps is quite often good. Sometimes there's a narrative around what's coming in terms of how you've structured your proposal, etc., etc. Oh, I was just saying somebody's got some tech issues. Let me just scroll.
Yeah, no, Laura's sorted, mate. It's all good.
Ah, beautiful. All right. That's Sally. Okay, excellent. All right, so that's where we're at. That's kind of a very simple recipe. It works in most situations. There's two or three, or probably more than that, other options, but this is one we like in terms of simplicity, and it's kind of easy to follow the structure, easy to follow the recipe. And then if you do have lots of people coming in saying, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? You can kind of say, well, we've kind of got this recipe. We know it works and it's been benchmarked against best practice around the world and God knows how many bids over the years. All right, so so that's
Mark, just while we're doing that, Mark, just someone's just got a quick question about how long should these exec summaries be, and it depends question, but for many bids, a couple of pages is certainly more than enough. A couple of pages, I think, for many bids. Obviously, there's larger bids, larger deals worth lots more money that probably should be a little bit longer, but a couple of pages, Mark, what do you think?
I totally agree. I think I'm one for telling the story until it's told. Generally, if you can do that and try to do it as quickly as possible. I think a gentleman by the name of Dr. Tom Sander, we reference a lot in our courses. He's a big influence on certainly how I go about writing bids, and I know Nigel holds him in esteem as well. I think he's of a view that it's kind of like 2 pages for the first 50 pages, isn't it? And then, you know, a page afterwards or something. Yeah, depending on how big it is. I mean, you do get some massive defense submissions and things like that, where an exec summary might be 10 pages and each section then might have a solution summary as well, and so on and so forth. But the key thing, I think, is to get super clear on your story and tell it as quickly as possible. I'm normally thinking we can convince somebody on 3 topics. That's always what I set myself the target of. Can we convince somebody on 3 topics? Maybe go to 4 if we need to. But all right. Oh, goodness me, time's zooming on. So let's just very quickly, in a nutshell, I hope you like my source icon, but so that's kind of the recipe, if you like, that we use for exec summaries 7 times out of 10 probably. And if there is a definition of the secret sauce, it's those win themes and benefit statements being 100% customer focused rather than having our in front of them, right? So for me, that's it in a nutshell. I don't know if does that align with you, Nigel?
Yeah, perfectly. You know, it does. Absolutely. Excellent
stuff. All right. So that's kind of a bit of the theory, right? So what are we going to do? How do we go about learning those skills, right? So a lot of them are highly specialized and they take a while to get a hang of. So what we're just going to talk a little bit around, how do you go about picking those skills up and embedding them in your, I guess, your own work-winning toolbox or kitchen, cupboard, pantry or something. And what's the best way forward? So where are we now, right? You might be sitting there with a bunch of ingredients and you think, how do I pick up these skills? I don't have time. How will I remember everything? Who's best to learn from? How do I pick a program? What do I need to do? All that type of good stuff, right? So what we've learned over the years in terms of the way to master these skills is you've got essentially 2 ways to go. You can kind of go down the conventional training route, or whereby you go and sit in a room for half a day or a couple of days, or you can take a different path, which I'll talk about later. But with conventional training, the attributes, the learning inputs are typically high volume. It's mostly one way. It's mostly short duration, etc. So stuff going into your head, and depending on what mood you're in and where you are in your daily cycles and rhythms, you'll remember a percentage of that. The outputs typically are driven by your own personal interpretation. If you don't use it or use what you've learned straight away, you tend to lose it, and that manifests in low retention rates and a low ROI on your training investment, both in terms of time and money. And that's kind of our experience from years of training, over 250 training engagements, despite our best efforts to be hilarious, entertaining, engaging, and all of that good stuff. All right. So the other way you can go about it is to use what we call modular learning programs. So we do, there's two main programs at the Academy that we do. The Bid Accelerator is the first of those, in which for example, in the context of exec summaries, we spend a lot of time in terms of the positioning phase, how to do that, customer analysis, competitive analysis, and capability assessment, for example, and also then feeding into how to build that stuff into your thinking around how you win work. So that program's kind of 12 modules over 12 weeks. There's some examinations and graduation stuff in there. And at the core of all of our training program are these live group coaching sessions in between each of the modules. That's great for those that are new to bidding, for example, or they might want to upskill their team or their business. Or you might just want to learn how to bid smarter, not harder, right? And get a return on your effort. The second,
I think also about this one quick one on that. I think also more for people who have got a general overview of the BD or the business cycle, not generally hardcore proposal people necessarily, but that's good to start people there at that overview level. That's what the Bid Accelerator does.
Oh, good question, but from Amanda, by the way. I don't know if you spotted that one in the chat.
I did. I answered that. Yes.
Done?
Yes.
Excellent. All right. So the second up is the Certified Bid Writer Program, and a lot of the deep dive on the exec summary stuff that we're talking about in this little webinar has come from that program. This one's slightly shorter, 9 modules, and what we've done is basically break down the art and science of persuasive writing into a series of progressive logical steps. We do get you to do assessments. So at the core of the program, this is probably the only program that I know of on writing where you actually get to do writing and work with your coach to get your work up to where it needs to be if it's not there already. And again, the live group coaching sessions are a key part of that. And again, this is for a whole range of people. Our current programs, we've got a mix of those that are completely new into bid writing, have seen it as a potential career. We've got people that are bid writers already, but looking to raise their game, might have been doing it for 2 or 3 years, and even some people that have been doing a lot longer than that. There's another group of people that are in sort of coordination and support roles that are looking to get into tender writing. And then at an organizational level, people that want to upskill their technical community, subject matter experts, their internal bid teams, stuff like that to get into the next level. So that's all of the programs run through our learning management system. So that essentially means you can access the course materials whenever you want. We're all busy bidding people, so it's really helpful to just dip in when it suits you, and more importantly, when it suits your brain and its readiness to accept content. The program is basically built around these 5 learning elements: online videos, like I said, in the LMS. The live coaching support in between each module is really important. That's where we work with all the participants and help them embed their skills, answer their questions, provide homework and feedback and stuff like that. And because of the modular nature of the courses, they give you time to develop and try concepts in your business, right? Which is, I think, one of the key things you don't get when you try and just do a super quick course. There's lots of quizzes in there to help you check your learning. And one of the key things that we're seeing from this type of format is because you go through the program with a cohort, everybody's working on the same stuff at the same pace, then you essentially get to learn with them and share ideas and cross-pollinate between industries and careers and stuff like that. All right, so whichever course you do, know that the programs follow the right things. So we spent ages picking the stuff that we know works, practical real-world techniques that you will be able to take away and use. And both programs break what you're going to learn into logical progressive steps and a sequence that you can work through, and you can fit them in with your busy lifestyle. If you're interested, the next intakes are the accelerators on the 5th of March, the Certified Bid Writer is on the 11th of April, and in terms of costs, it's 2495, which covers all of the learning materials, live coaching sessions, course assessment and feedback. Both programs have a personal action plan in there to help you work out what it is you need to retain and remember and go and do in your business. and then you get real-time support and advice all the way through. And I should say, and some examinations and certifications at the end, which is in the form of a micro credential issued by the Bid Academy through our partners, Credly. All right, so that's about the end of it. If you are interested in taking action to get a hold of that secret sauce and get into that exec summary recipe, then you'll be getting a follow-up email tomorrow with some things, suggested ways forward. That'll come from Lara and her team. We're going to pop into the chat a link for some more information packs. So there's one in there already for the Certified Bid Writer course. Just click on that and it will give you a load of stuff that's got things like the learning outcomes, the brochure, some information that you can take to, if you need to get approval for your spend, some justification on the value that you'll get. You can stay on the line for a chat if you'd like to, or you can click on the link in the chat and book a call with Nigel and myself just to talk about bidding and so on and so forth. So I think that brings us about to the end. Oh, there's a nice picture of a burger just to close things off, just to remind us that that's all about food. It looks quite nice. And I think that's about the size of it.